This week we take a look at Chapter 6 in your textbook, which covers creating advanced queries and reports. Some of our student outcomes will be creating and using action queries. We'll take a look at the Query Wizard. Note there is not a pause in practice on the Query Wizard, so there is a bonus lecture this week that talks about creating a cross-tab query. We will take a look at changing query properties. Then we switch gears over to reports where we build a report in Design View. Excuse me, we take a look at customizing that report and then adding some calculative controls. Lastly, we also do take a look at subreports, which is a related one-to-many report that we kind of pop into the detail area of an existing report. As far as creating and using action queries, be very careful when you use an action query because it does make a permanent change to the database. So it is one of those things that in the real world you probably do want to stop and back up your database before you run any action queries. There are 4 different types of action queries that our book addresses: an update query, which would literally allow you to go in and update a value in a field in a record. So for instance, if you're doing an across the board 2% increase in product price, you're giving everyone a 3% raise, you can physically use the query to do that for you. A pen query would mean adding records to the end of an existing table. A delete query is pretty self-explanatory. It finds records that are based on certain criteria and deletes them. And then a make table query. Make table queries are great, for instance, if you need to move data maybe to a historical records table. So you would make a table with these new records, then double back to the original table and probably run a delete query to get rid of the old records. As far as the Query Wizard is concerned, your textbook does discuss it. Unfortunately, there is not a pause in practice that addresses it directly, so please watch the additional bonus video this week that does discuss the cross-tab query. This allows you to summarize, much like a group by query, excuse me, but it does then distribute the information in a meaningful form across multiple columns. So do take a moment to check that out. This is one of the things that I noticed a lot of times in business and industry that people forget about, and they try to show data like this, and then they inevitably sometimes end up putting it into Microsoft Excel when oftentimes you don't need to do that. A cross-tab query would work just fine. They also talk about 2 other types of queries that are available in the Query Wizard: find duplicate records, find unmatched records. These are typically queries that you use when you've inherited a database that isn't quite up to speed with normalization and proper relationship integrity. So if you have duplicate records in a table, obviously something is wrong. You can use this query to identify them for you. And then unmatched records would be orphan records. For instance, in a one-to-many relationship, you expect that foreign key to lead back to the one side of the one table. If you try to create a relationship and Access says I can't do this because there are records that don't meet the data integrity, run the find unmatched records query to find those orphan records and figure out how they do lead back to the primary key. As far as changing query properties, we will take a look at addressing date functions. We do take a look at date part to create a parameter, and we also take a look at date diff. But there are some other powerful date functions within Microsoft Access that are listed in your book this week. I've also included an optional link that goes out to a list of all the available Access functions in the course. So check that out if you are interested in looking a little bit deeper at the functions that Microsoft Excel is capable of. The other half of our learning this week discusses building a report in Design View. Up until now, we have started with a blank report in one of our chapters. We've also looked at using the Report Wizard and Auto Report features, but this takes us a little bit deeper into the design side of building a report. So I've mentioned these sections and what they do in regards to displaying information in Microsoft Access, but you'll notice here in this week's video lectures a lot more information about what it means to put something in the report header versus the page header. For instance, if you put something in the report header, it only prints on the first page. If you put something in the page header, it prints at the top of each page that's printed or displayed. So it's good to understand what these different sections that are defined in the design of a report actually mean when you're in there moving controls, text boxes around, and so forth. So you will be taking a deeper look at the design side of the table. That's what this slide is showing. It's showing group by headers and footers here specifically. This is also a great little graphic that's pointing out on the actual printed report where all of those things do in fact display. So that is discussed in one of our pause and practice, and also these visuals are in your textbook. As far as reports in Design View, we will take a look at deleting pages and adding report sections. We'll take a look at group sections. Obviously, you're going to create a report. Understanding where the data comes from, which could be a table or a query. We'll also take a look at adding and taking away fields in Design View and creating a parameter report that's actually driven from a control source of a parameter query. We do get into customization. Customization gets you a little bit into the weeds. I do want to let you know that in a lot of these exercises, they're very specific about, well, make the control 1.2 inches wide, move the control 1 inch up, or make it 1 inch below the heading. That's all well and good. But honestly, in the real world, when you're sitting in the design of a report, you're going to be using controls like alignment controls and spacing controls. You're going to be customizing the width and height of a control based on the data that that particular report needs to display. So while it's nice to know that you can get into this really nitty-gritty stuff in the properties, it's great to know where those are. Oftentimes, as we see in textbooks, they get a little overzealous in making controls a certain width and a certain height. But please go through this so you understand those properties, and do pay attention to some of the alignment tools in the contextual ribbon, things like aligning things at the top, or increasing or decreasing vertical or horizontal space. We will also take a look at adding a calculated control on the report level, and again, where you put that calculation determines what that report will calculate. If the calculation is at the group footer level, it's going to calculate the group. If it's placed at the report footer level, it's going to calculate all that control throughout the entire report and give you a grand total. So we do take a look at using the expression builder a bit more. We looked at this a bit in form design. Now we're looking at it a bit in report design. Subreports is a way to link the many records back to the single record that's introduced in the main area of a report. So we'll be creating one of those. That's what this slide is talking about here, this idea that there will be a one-to-many relationship between the two reports. So in total, this particular chapter covers two broad areas. It covers action queries, and it also covers the design of a report. Two very important areas as you build upon what you already know about Microsoft Access. As per usual, if you're going through the pause and practice or the homework assignments this week, or if you have a question about your group project, please feel free to reach out.